So we're used to thinking of violence as something explosive and spectacular, as erupting into concentrated visibility. But we need to think through, I think, the strategic and representational challenges posed by the relative invisibility of what I call slow violence. In other words, a violence that is neither spectacular nor instantaneous, but instead is incremental. It's a gradual violence, and its calamitous repercussions are postponed across a range of timescales.
That was an excerpt of an address given by Professor Rob Nixon back in 2013 regarding his book, Slow Violence and the Environmentalism of the Poor. Slow violence gave me the language to articulate the through line of the 12 songs that I had spent the last years writing music about. That's why I decided to call the album Slow Violence, because I really feel like it encapsulates the narrative told by all of the songs. Nixon's argument that in the context of climate change, gender, racial, and class-based violence, there's a drastic need to reframe our very notion of what violence is. The traditional definition of violence implies visibility and immediacy. Our visual and immediate brains have been paralyzed against even conceptualizing the mountain of small accumulations of injustice. And these small accumulations of violence, emotional, physical, environmental, and spiritual, are detrimental. Slow violence and the environmentalism of the poor propels forward a call to action. Art holds a unique capacity to illuminate via representation. The translation of the album into the visual was guided most heavily by the concept of slow violence. In this spirit, the album cover was created using natural materials. I am really concerned about the slow violence in the textile and fashion industry as an artist that works in those mediums, the consequences of which we're geographically removed from in the global north, but it's really crucial that we don't turn a blind eye. As synthetic dye and fabric treatment chemicals pollute waterways, structural adjustment programs enforce disproportionate relationship between burden and benefit, microplastics shed off of petroleum-based fabrics, and fashion consumption cycles demand rapidly increasing production. These are all examples of slow violence. The album itself is really centered around responding to these violences, responding to the cognitive dissonance associated with the climate crisis, knowing that I am simultaneously causing it as I am concerned by it. But I think that acknowledgement and that reflection creates a path forward, which is really crucial to where we are right now. Art really does play a strong role in that process of reflection and catharsis and overwhelm, and that's what the music is really about, and the work altogether. I think that developing my own materials in a more holistic manner strengthened the relationship I had with the work and how it finally turned out, as opposed to just going to the store and buying synthetic art supplies. The colors came from something living and not petroleum, which is a really cool thing. Most stuff comes from petroleum nowadays. Even though it's just a small drop in the bucket, small protests and acts of resistance, like making your own things, sort of pushes against the globalized industrial networks, which are rife with ecological destruction and human rights violations. It encourages a path diverged, one instead committed to regeneration, vitality, and equality. So in the spirit of knowledge sharing and empowered making, I want to tell you about how I made this album cover. first thing to note is that natural dye only works with natural materials, so either plant, which is usually referred to as cellulose fibers, or animal protein-based fibers. So like cotton, linen, silk, wool, all beautiful. Polyester, nylon, acrylic, not beautiful. That is petroleum. That is plastic. Which the industries that profit off of that do a very good job convincing us that it's not just plastic. Like, I had no idea that polyester was plastic, and the dyes that are used to fix to plastic are often very harsh. And, fun fact, in the United States, there are no regulations about what can be put in adult clothing. So, often these chemical companies that are developing dyes aren't even reported to any sort of governing body. I mean, there isn't even really any governing bodies, especially now, that are actually regulating this stuff. So we have no idea what's in our clothes and our consumer products more broadly, therefore our ecological systems and our bodily systems. So the fiber that I'm sorting here is cotton, which is what I used for this project. The first step of any natural dye is scouring the fiber. I used a healthy sprinkling of soda ash. I think the correct measurement is 4 teaspoons per pound of fabric. I'm going to link some resources in the video that are more precise than I typically am. Cleaning is really important because it gets rid of all the waxes and oils and dirt and just other things that might have gotten on it in the manufacturing process. The next step, if you want to be really thorough and you're using plant material, is tannins, which are naturally occurring in some dye stuff. Like, I'm pretty sure onion skins have a lot of tannins in them, but you can let them soak in the fabric. I usually let them soak overnight if I decide to do it. It just helps the mordant and the dye become more absorbed into the fiber. Mordanting is the next step, which I usually use alum for, which you can get in the spice section at a grocery store. It helps the fiber be able to absorb and maintain color for longer, and it's something that I didn't do, and I was like, why does my natural dye not look good? And then I did it, and there we go. The next step is adding the color, which is the fun part. Dyes can come from a range of sources: roots, fruit, leaves, minerals, vegetables, and even insects. Usually extracted by soaking and simmering, the natural material reveals the color. I used some that I bought in powdered form, like cochineal and logwood, which aren't necessarily easily accessible, but natural dye is everywhere in common kitchen staples like red onion skins, black beans, cabbage, and coffee. So it really is an accessible way of making art supplies. And foraging, too, is a really good option. In the northeastern United States, sumac berries, pokeberry, juniper, all very common and make great dyes. The colors of the plant material aren't always the same as the colors of the dye. Like juniper is like a dusty blue berry, but it makes a butter yellow dye. One of the main problems that I ran into was that there's just not a large body of knowledge that's readily available on the internet. A lot of this knowledge has been lost over generations, and so I think knowledge sharing is one of the most important ways to build a community. I also documented these experiments with natural dye because really that's what it was all experimental, in a book which I've scanned and put on my website if you're curious. And here's a cool thing: modifiers change the dye colors really readily by shifting the pH levels. So adding baking soda changed this color from purple to light blue. So the final piece was created using black beans, turmeric, red onions, iron, coffee, red cabbage, logwood, and cochineal. And here's their outline locations. Most stuff you can get at the grocery store other than iron, logwood, and cochineal. Cochineal's fun. It's a little bug that lives on cacti. For the album cover itself, I created 12 illustrations. Each one is representative of one of the songs. They were then stretched into a custom frame that I made with thread, and I wanted to convey the simultaneous tension and interconnectedness of slow violence. So even though they may appear fragmented, the thread binds them together. There's a couple of reasons why hand embroidery is the perfect visualization of slow violence. First, I think the form itself. Each individual stitch is a small mark upon the canvas, but accumulated, they become visible and unignorable. Also, the resulting work is estranged and distant from the persistent, meticulous labor that went into it. Viewers can easily disregard the process if it's not outlined to them. I see parallels with how geographically displaced Western consumers are from the origin of our things. I think, too, the meditative capacity of embroidery, the pushing and pulling and ebbing and flowing of the stitching itself, opens up time for reflection, which is something we're lacking in the digital world. Hand making is a defiant act upon a gnawing system that seeks to render us utterly reliant upon consuming. I'm worried that the speed at which we're losing practical knowledge for practices like mending or growing your own food or even cooking are not sustainable, and that reliance is being exploited. What takes millions of years to build takes just one bad dream to forget. I love paper mache. Paper mache is like clay, sort of, like, honestly, like guitar, too. You have to fully be in it, because your hands are so messy that that's the activity that you're doing. You're not doing anything else. So it's very focusing. It's another pretty accessible art medium. I use newspaper or just like any sort of thinner, more malleable paper. And then the recipe for paper mache that I use is literally just flour and water. And I mix it to like the consistency of like pancake batter. And then it hardens and holds its shape really well. So it's very versatile, and you can paint on it, you can seal it with glue, you can use it almost like clay. Huge advocate. Hi, I just wanted to show. I just finished embroidering. This is gonna be like a track list. Well, it is a track list. This is the album. It's in reverse, but all embroidered. I'm very proud of it. I'm really looking forward to developing the physical world of the album more. I'm trying to embed the other visual elements with the same care, intention, and emotion that I put into the music. And as a result, things move a bit slower, but I think that in the end that will pay off. So, like, along those same lines, for continuity's sake, I embroidered the track list. I created a sculpture out of paper mache and wire, and then strung the canvas with the embroidery into that organic shaped frame. I got to take it into a photography studio and get some really nice pictures of it, which is really cool. And now it lives on the inside of the CD cases that I made. I think that the nature of making things slowly itself is an act of resistance against the high speed, immediate, instant gratification that we've been forced to become so accustomed to. A way to overcome that alienation is by spending time in nature and sort of regrounding yourself in the material reality of the planet. That wisdom is ultimately what will sustain human life, sustain all life. Okay, I'm gonna retrieve. That's the final piece. This is the final product. Ta-da! I think it's like 2 feet by 2 feet, maybe. What I really love about it is that the back is like that. So on the CDs that I made, the back of them is the back. You can see all the stitching and such. The sort of thesis of the album is that it's an effort to process and respond to the slower violences which ebb away at our collective autonomy, empowerment, and I think our agency. In terms of sonic inspirations, mostly lies in alternative rock and grunge. I think there's a real truth and beauty in the artist's visceral, raw bravery to be ugly and to be imperfect. In a world where we're constantly trying to prove that we're flawless and we're perfect, it's almost the antithesis, which really draws me in. And I think there are real unexpected connections between the authenticity of grunge and the authenticity of handmaking. There are a lot of tangible and physical attributes between the two. It almost feels like the equivalent of the other medium. And I feel like it's meaningful to articulate the unity in these processes.